Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today for our webinar, Understanding the Impact of ADHD on Campus Wellbeing. My name is Tarin. I am one of the Knowledge and Research Leads at the Center for Innovation in Campus Mental Health. Before we begin, I do want to go over a few things. I would like to start this session by acknowledging that even though we are in a virtual session here today, we're all joining from ancestral lands of many Indigenous communities. I am in Toronto. CICMH is located in Toronto, Treaty 13 territory, and the home of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Wendat peoples, the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Chippewa, and people who may still be unrecorded. As a settler myself, it is my duty to acknowledge the effects of colonialism that we still see today and think of the ways that I may be participating in it and the ways I can actively push back against it. As I go through this webinar, I want you to think about how you might be able to support Indigenous students and colleagues within your role to promote a whole campus approach to health and wellness, and to be an active participant in the reconciliation process. I will also go through some housekeeping. I put some in the chat, but closed captioning is available at the bottom of your screen. If you would like French closed captioning, I want you to make sure that your speaker language is turned English and then closed captioning language is turned to French. Chat function is there for discussing thoughts and reactions, and I believe our speaker will be going through some case studies, so that's a great way to sort of do that. We also have the Q&A function for questions, so at the end of this presentation, there will be time for questions, and you can ask your questions there. There will be a recording available on our website after the webinar. It'll be uploaded to our website at the end of the day or at least by tomorrow morning. By the end of the webinar, we will have a survey to get your thoughts and feedback on how this webinar went. This is also a great opportunity for you to tell us on what types of topics you want to see more. So please make sure that you keep an eye out for that. It'll pop up when you end the webinar, and it will also be there in the email that gets sent out. I believe the next day. So keep an eye out on that. I'll also put it in the chat as well. Okay, so without further ado, I will turn it over to our speaker, Dana Kissondath. Over to you, Dana. I'm just going to stop sharing so that you can share your slides.
All right, everything look okay?
Everything looks fantastic.
Fantastic. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Dana. I go by the pronouns she, her, and I am the outreach coordinator for the Center for ADHD Awareness Canada. I appreciate everyone joining today, and as mentioned, very excited to have some conversation through the chat. And please add in any thoughts along the way and questions if we cannot get to all of them. I also will be speaking a lot. Please feel free to email the info@caddac.ca if you have further questions or concerns or need a follow-up or clarity on anything that's mentioned. Our resource navigator, Layla, who works at CADDAC, will be able to support with any questions around ADHD. She's there to help navigate different resources and things like coaching, any types of places where you can get diagnosed wherever you are in the country, and support with things like that. So yeah, a little bit about me and a bit of transparency. I recently was diagnosed with ADHD in my 30s, so I come with my own experience of navigating a degree and a post-grad without being diagnosed, and the challenges of not being able to understand certain things like emotional regulation and challenges that came with ADHD and being misdiagnosed with other things. So I come with that experience and understanding that it can be really challenging, especially not knowing what resources are out there. And so I hope today at least sheds a little bit of light on what we have to offer, and also how to make a more neuro-inclusive space for not just ourselves, but for those around us, whether it's in school, work, in our personal lives, wherever that is, to reduce stigma and create more inclusivity. So we are going to go through here talking about our agenda. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are at CADDAC and our services and programs. We're going to go through an interactive true and false poll, talk about neurodiversity, and then also dig into ADHD, of course, talk about executive functions, diagnosis, treatment, disclosure, and then also talk about impacts of ADHD, whether it is for faculty and staff on campus, or for students, or just in life in general, and talk about possible accommodations that can support you or your students as well, and then go through some case studies and have time for a Q&A. Another disclosure as well, at CADDAC, we provide services and programs that are skill building. We do not offer treatment or assessments. So anything regarding any medical questions, we do not answer with our ideas or our suggestions, because that is not our expertise. We will refer you to where to get that information, but we do not provide recommendations. And same with assessments. Someone might ask questions of, oh, do I have ADHD? There's a lot of misinformation, especially with the rise of social media. So we try to lead folks to the right areas to find out that information, and also try to guide people to getting those true assessments. And we'll speak a little bit more to that in a bit. So who we are at CADDAC. We are the only national charity in Canada, nationwide, dedicated to improving the lives of individuals affected by ADHD and their families. We were incorporated in 2006, but our programming all started in 2019, and everything we offer is virtual at the moment. And hopefully we will be able to have things in person, because we know that there is a growing need and want for in person, especially for engagement. And it's hard with ADHD and being online. We understand that. Our mission is to improve the lives of Canadians affected by ADHD through our three main pillars, which are awareness, education, and advocacy, and vision a Canada where people with ADHD are accepted, understood, and supported. So this is a view of our programs from last year, and we're currently in the midst of running all of our psychoeducational programs, as well as our skills-based programs. They run between 8 and 12 weeks. They have a fee between $50 and $100 for these programs, but we also offer a sliding scale if needed, no questions asked. You also don't need to have an official diagnosis, especially if you're a caregiver or someone living with a partner who has ADHD and you're just looking for information and tools on how to support those around you. And our support groups are currently running and are drop-in based, completely free. And they are once a month. They are really great. They are all led by facilitators who have lived experience in all of the different types of support groups we have. Our youth support group is 16 to 24. That's the age bracket we have. And they have really great turnout for people to just come and talk about their journeys, to find resources, to just sit and listen if they want to. But they're a great resource for folks who just want a space to learn and to speak with others who are experiencing similar situations. And to dive a little bit more into our three pillars. So as I mentioned, we have our programs, and we also have a lot of really great webinars that live on our website on topics like the disability income tax and the challenges with navigating that, especially in tax season, and many other webinars like women and menopause. And yeah, really great. They all live on our website and you can check them out. We also have our annual conference coming up this year. It's going to be out west. Last year, it was just recently in Etobicoke. And so if you happen to be there, you can check it out. And we have our presentations that we try to spread awareness and different types of ads and things like that we have out there, just to get people more aware of what's going on. And then on our website, again, for advocacy, we have tons of really great resources like policy papers. We produce one a year based off of our research, and also accommodation charts, which is a really great point. So we have school accommodation charts and also work accommodation charts. They are very extensive and they're based off of the DSM-5. So it'll go through different situations that might be challenges for a student or a workplace, which also can be related to just at home as well. And then solutions for it. It's a very, very long list, and it includes both hard and soft accommodations. So things that are easy and free, and things that might cost money, like coaching and things like that. So I encourage you to check that out. You can print it out and have it there in case you have people asking you questions about that as well. So we're going to go into our polls now. We have 5 poll true and false questions. And the first question is, I'm going to give a second to put up the poll. Perfect. People with ADHD just need to try harder. So please put if you think that's true, false, or I don't know. Not sure if I can see the results of the poll on my end, so I might just leave that for you. Just give a second, and if you can let me know.
I think I will be able to share the results. So okay, I will end the poll now.
Perfect. Thanks for the honesty. I don't know, because that's fair, and most people said false. So that is false. Let's get back on here. People with ADHD don't just need to try harder. It is a neurodevelopmental disorder. It's not a matter of effort or willpower. People living with ADHD have differences in brain functioning that is very real. It affects focus, self-regulation, and organization, and we'll speak to that a bit later. And it's also important to note that ADHD is recognized as a disability by several organizations and legal frameworks, including the Canadian Human Rights Act, Provincial Human Rights Codes, and Canadian Revenue Agency and Workplace Safety and Insurance Board. All right, next question. It's a little bit longer. ADHD is the most common neurodevelopmental disorder in Canada, affecting 4 to 6% of adults, 5 to 7% of children, or approximately 1.8 million Canadians. All right, so leaning towards either true or I don't know. Perfect. I'm gonna So this is true. Oh, sorry. This is true. It is the most common neurodevelopmental disorder in Canada. Next question. Students with ADHD are significantly more likely to drop out of post-secondary education compared to the neurotypical peers. Okay, great. Thank you. 97% said true. So according to research, post-secondary students with ADHD are at a greater risk of academic failure and dropping out. And I will speak to this again in a little bit, especially around executive function challenges. Next question, ADHD is more common in males than females. mix here. We have all right, so we have 31% true, 37 false, and 32% I don't know. Great, thank you. So this is a good one, and I said, let's talk. So for ADHD, it is statistically more common in males and females, but the reality is that all genders, whether they have an inattentive or hyperactive, they show their symptoms differently. And historically, a lot of research has been based off of cis boys and men who have tended to be more hyperactive and disruptive, which is more visible, and other traits that are easier to see and spot. So girls who are usually less disruptive due to many factors, including masking, their difficulties in showing quieter signs of inattention can be easily missed or misdiagnosed. So today we are actually seeing ADHD more equally across genders. The ratio of diagnosed boys to girls has shifted from 25:1 to around 3:1. But the lingering bias still affects many cis girls and neurodiverse, many folks, gender diverse folks who may be misdiagnosed with anxiety or depression instead of ADHD. I'm going to dig into that a little bit shortly as well. And the last question, ADHD impacts emotional regulation, not just attention and hyperactivity. All right, I'm going to end that one quickly because it's an easy, everyone so far has said true. Thank you. We have a smart bunch of well-informed folks out there. So it is true, and I'm going to just dig into that quickly here too. I know there's a lot of words on the screen, but emotional self-regulation is one of the most misunderstood aspects of ADHD, especially in adults. So while ADHD is widely recognized for its impact on attention, focus, and hyperactivity, research increasingly shows that emotional regulation challenges are actually a core feature of the condition, not just a side effect. So ADHD affects the prefrontal cortex, which I'll dig into, the part of the brain that's responsible for impulse control, attention regulation, and emotional regulation. And so these things can lead to the brain having a harder time pausing, filtering, and regulating reactions, especially under stress and fatigue. All right, so we're going to go now into, thank you for participating in the poll. We're going to go into more of the meat of the presentation, and then we'll end with a little bit more of a collaborative discussion again. But talking about neurodiversity, so it refers to the natural variation in how people think, learn, and process information, and includes a range of neurological differences, such as the ones listed on the screen. So I want to ask, have you ever wondered why some brains seem to work differently? It's a very broad question, but that's really where neurodiversity comes in. So it's the idea that neurological differences like autism, ADHD, and dyslexia are just natural variations of the human brain. The term was coined in the 1990s by Judy Singer, who's an Australian sociologist, and she thought, why are we treating these brain differences like diseases when really they're just part of human diversity and they're just differences? Neurological differences like autism and ADHD are just that, neurological differences. And in other words, different brains work differently. This concept really challenges us to rethink what we consider to be normal. And it's about celebrating the fact that our brains all work a little bit differently. So for example, some people are really great at focusing on details, while others are really great at seeing the big picture. Some people's brains think in words, while others think in just images and pictures, so completely differently. It's really about understanding that neurodiversity isn't about better or worse, it's about difference in minds and thought and functioning, and honing in on the skills and challenges that are associated with it. Talking about ADHD now, and specifically, as we mentioned, it is the most common neurodevelopmental disorder in Canada and affects 1.8 million Canadians. It affects all ethnicities and socioeconomic strata. It does not discriminate, and it is highly hereditary. So we're finding now a lot of children are getting diagnosed currently And we're finding that their parents are coming in weeks later being like, oh, a lot of those signs and symptoms are true for me, and I'm having a lot of similar challenges. So that number of 1.8 million Canadians is in fact definitely a lot higher. We just haven't gotten those the newest statistics in. And more and more people are getting diagnosed every single day because people are starting to understand what this is. So ADHD shows up in different ways, and it's different from person to person. My ADHD will look completely different to someone else's. And I do want to note that it does not affect your intelligence in any way. Hyperactive impulsive ADHD is what most people will consider or picture with that little boy in the back of the classroom disrupting the class. So that restlessness, interrupting, fidgeting, or blurting things out, especially because it's more visible. But inattentive ADHD can be quieter. It includes trouble focusing, being forgetful, easily distracted, losing things, or zoning out. And this person perhaps might seem lazy or disengaged when in reality their brain is working overtime just to keep up. So both types are real and equally valid and need to be understood better as well. And then there's obviously the combined type with little bits of both of those are present in the individual. I've also delivered this presentation before where folks have been like, what about the strengths of ADHD? Why are you focusing so much on the challenges? And I want to highlight that before we go any further, because at CADDAC, we really try to lead by saying that ADHD is not a superpower, it is a disability, and we need to better understand what the challenges are so that we can build those skills to live the full potential and understand what those challenges are, instead of just, saying everything's okay and things like that, because as I said, it doesn't affect your intelligence, it affects your executive functioning, which can show up in many different ways in your life. So when we talk about attention deficit, it can also be misleading. So it's not about lacking attention, it's about struggling to control it. Nobody has full control over their attention, we know that, but someone with ADHD has a lot less control. So the challenge is directing your attention where you need it rather than where it naturally wants to go. And this lack of control is what often leads to hyperfocus, where someone with ADHD can become intensely absorbed in a certain task, especially ones that they really like. For example, reading a book or playing a video game or working on a specific task at work versus something that might be a little bit more boring for them. And lastly, I would like to revisit the topic of ADHD and gender and how it can present differently. So as we said, ADHD is unique from person to person, and there's no one size fits all, so it makes diagnosis a lot more challenging. So with that said, cis boys and men are often diagnosed young, often because of their symptoms. And I do want to note as well, doesn't mean that all cis men and boys have hyperactive ADHD. It's just where a lot of the research lies. And then meanwhile, ADHD in cis girls, women, and gender diverse folks can show up as forgetfulness, daydreaming, or anxiety. And these signs are easier to overlook, leading to underdiagnosis or misdiagnosis. And also cis women and gender diverse folks are often misdiagnosed with anxiety and depression, because those are things that are coming out, are presenting, and the root cause is not actually being looked at. And also a lot of folks are getting diagnosed a lot later in life. So society has historically expected cis women and girls to be quiet and organized, which means many learn to mask their ADHD, which I mentioned before, hiding their struggles to really try to fit in and conform due to societal norms. And this can lead to burnout, anxiety, or being misdiagnosed with conditions like depression. And this is especially common with those who are expected to be caretakers or high achievers. It's also important to note that there is a huge gap in ADHD research for gender diverse folks and women, and most studies focus on cis boys. So with more awareness, especially through organizations like us at CADDAC, we can hopefully push for more research and funding to support all experiences. All right, ADHD and executive functions. So they are housed in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, and they're the ability to think about your thoughts before you act on them. They are a set of cognitive processes that allow us to engage in goal-directed behavior. And they're also known as the management system of the brain. They enable us to plan ahead, evaluate the past, start and finish a task, and manage our time properly. They can affect what we do in the present and also how we plan and organize for the future. So Dr. Thomas Brown, who's actually our keynote speaker for our upcoming conference, is a clinical psychologist who specializes in ADHD, especially executive functioning. And he's taken all these skills and divided them into 6 areas, which you can see on the screen. We have action, memory, emotion, effort, focus, and activation. So struggles with executive functioning can look like trouble starting or finishing a task, executing multiple steps of a project, keeping your belongings organized, struggling to make decisions or lose important items frequently, acting without speaking, and being impulsive and blurting things out, cutting people off, appear overly emotional, very passionate about things. So a lot of these things might be true and sound like common things that a lot of us do experience. But again, someone with ADHD is perhaps experiencing these things to an extreme that is making their day-to-day a lot more challenging, perhaps showing up for work a lot later, leading them to be fired, being disorganized and mismanaging tasks, which will then again cause them to perhaps get fired after constant, reminders or meetings. So it can lead to detrimental things happening. That is important to understand, that it's not them just being lazy or, disorganized because they don't care. It's because they're having challenges with these parts of the executive functions. So to go over briefly the diagnosis process, in Ontario, symptoms must significantly impact daily life. So at school, work, and relationships, or all the above. And the process starts with a doctor, psychologist, or a psychiatrist, and they'll do a detailed assessment, including interviews and questionnaires, and may ask for input from family or teachers, depending on your age and the assessment center. And there's no single test. The diagnosis is based on patterns over time. So psychologists can diagnose ADHD, but only doctors or nurse practitioners can prescribe medication. And again, Layla, who's the resource navigator at ADHD at CADDAC, can provide suggestions on where to get lower cost and faster diagnosis in anywhere in Canada, but specifically in Ontario, if that's where you're based. So talk about treatment, and again, not going into any specific medications, but we at CADDAC believe that the best treatment is a multimodal approach of medication and psychosocial programming. So we say pills are not necessarily skills. You need to learn those skills and habits and routines to be able to, implement a new strategy to help you do whatever it is that needs a little bit more refinement, or needs a little bit more of a routine, or whatever the thing is. But ADHD is a medical disorder. And so with any medical disorder, there is a medical aspect, and then we have the psychosocial aspect. So giving an example of diabetes, you'll often perhaps need the insulin, but you also might need to speak to a nutritionalist or make a diet change, maybe a social worker, lifestyle changes and things like that. So you're not just taking the medication, you're also making lifestyle changes that will make you be the healthiest and live the longest life that you can be successful. And then going over disclosure. So this is one of the most personal and complicated decisions that someone may face when living with ADHD, because it's very personal. It's important to know that there are legal protections in place, both for students and for employees, but how and when to disclose is highly individual. And again, we do not make recommendations or suggestions, because it highly depends on those around you, and also taking into account misunderstanding and stigmas that still are deeply rooted in our systems. So the workplace or classroom culture plays a huge role in whether someone feels safe to disclose. And that's why, as colleagues and educators, we all play a role in creating environments that make support possible, whether or not someone chooses to disclose. So talking about impacts of ADHD and looking at more than just focus, it can impact all areas of our lives, whether it's from education, finances, emotion, family, occupation, time management, and friends. So to give a couple examples with finances, impulsivity or forgetfulness can lead to missed bills or overspending or poor budgeting, especially when relation to dopamine, and wanting to get that dopamine kick, as folks have been saying a lot, because of that impulsive part of the brain. And emotionally, people can experience higher rates of frustration or lower self-esteem, or perhaps mood swings. And this can affect, of course, all areas, including family, friends, relationships, job performance, and things like that. So it's really important to understand that these challenges aren't due to a lack of effort or being able to just naturally do these things. They're tied to how the ADHD brain processes attention, motivation, and executive function. And then to go in briefly about impacts in the classroom, it can affect many different ways, of course, focusing, but also impulsivity. Again, there's going to be a lot of overlap, whether it's in the classroom or just in general in life. But for the impulsivity about blurting out, interrupting, rushing through tasks because they want to do something that's more exciting, or just not doing the task at all, which can be issues with time management, with missed deadlines and last minute work, leading to underachievement, no matter how bright that student might be. And then group work can be a huge challenge as well because of the follow through, the communication. So being mindful of that when figuring out group work, because I know that it's an important part of our lives to learn how to do those things. But yeah, the executive functioning challenges might pose more of a challenge for certain folks. So it's really important, again, to understand all the different ways it can affect our lives. To go into different, that this isn't an exhaustive list at all, but what inattentive in the classroom could look like is careless, perhaps lacks attention to detail, perhaps dreamy, not engaged or not listening, disorganized, can't follow through on tasks, perhaps forgetful. And then hyperactive can look like fidgeting and squirming. People say there's like a constant buzz because it's just like always needing to move. I feel like you can see it in my body right now, just like moving a lot. Over talkative, blurts out answers, can't wait their turn because they're eager and impulsive to want to, share what they're saying, and they're passionate. And also loud can look like loud. And it can also be many other things on this list here. And this again goes to whether you're a student or a teacher or whatever age, because ADHD does not go away with age. You just learn different coping skills. So yes, there's many different ways that it can present itself. Going into faculty and staff living with ADHD. So while we often focus on how it affects students, it's also important to acknowledge that many faculty and staff are also living with ADHD. And studies estimate, as we talked about, 4 to 6% of Canadians are adults who are living with ADHD, and they are represented across all areas of life, including instructors or administrative staff. Challenges, so symptoms such as challenges with time management, organization, prioritizing tasks, and sustaining attention can affect workplace performance. So for example, a staff member may struggle with meeting deadlines or managing multiple projects without clear instructions in place. So understanding that those things can present differently. And unfortunately, many adults with ADHD have grown up masking their symptoms, especially due to a lack of research in the past. So this can lead to fatigue, imposter syndrome, and burnout, especially in high pressure academic environments. And supportive measures like flexible deadlines when possible, quieter workspaces or hybrid, assistive technology, or regular check-ins with staff members or supervisors can make a significant difference. Just as we encourage accommodations and compassion for students, extending that same support to staff and faculty fosters a healthier and more neuro-inclusive culture as well. So I'm not going to go into this list in detail because there's a lot here, but as I mentioned, we do have a bunch of really great resources on our website that include different accommodation charts. So we have the workplace and classroom accommodation charts, but this is just a small little example of what it could look like for an overlap for both, whether you're staff or your students. And a lot of it is just providing suggestions for what might work for somebody. And as I mentioned many times, what might work, what my ADHD is very different than the person next to me. So what might work for me might not work for someone else. It's unfortunately a lot of trial and error and reflection on, okay, this thing's working. And then you have to build that habit, which is challenging in itself for anybody. And then seeing if that routine or that habit is helping with whatever that challenge is. So things might also be very obvious, like, checklists or email follow-ups or things like that. But I think being cognizant of how that's helping, those little things can go a long way. So this is the last slide before moving into the case studies, which I think is one of the most important areas that I'd like to really highlight to create a neuro-inclusive space. So you or I might not be in a position to change institutional policies, but we and you are part of the culture, and that means a lot. So we all have a role to play. So creating a neuro-inclusive space isn't only about big system changes, it's also about just the tone of an email or how you give feedback or making space in a meeting for someone who processes information differently. So if you work with students or colleagues or supervisors or just with folks in your life who are who are neurodivergent, or you yourself are, these small little acts can reduce stress, build trust, and help everyone feel safer being themselves. So neuroinclusion doesn't have to mean more work. It just means being more intentional with what we already do. So to go over what's on the screen, we have practice patience and assume good intent. Normalize asking for clarification or repetition. Don't just assume someone heard you or knew what exactly you meant. Sometimes I need to reread something 5 times before I understand it, or I have to, hear it a couple times for it to really stick because my brain is having a hard time focusing on what that thing was. Sometimes it can be very simple language and I'm like, I don't think you're speaking English to me right now. And so it just really depends. So that goes into using multiple formats when sharing information. I really prefer having multiple modes of information, methods. So offer flexibility where possible, deadlines and communication styles, model self-awareness and openness. So about attention or focus challenges. And then encourage a culture of kindness, not perfection. So really celebrating also kindness instead of just all the wins that are more tangible. That leaves us into our first case study. So I'm going to read through this a little bit slowly. I know sometimes I can speak fast, and if I can get you to either unmute or put your suggestions into the chat to have a little bit more interaction, that would be fantastic. So the background, Jordan is a professor known for their innovative teaching style and student rapport. They've recently taken on a leadership role within the faculty, but colleagues have noticed they miss meetings, struggle with deadlines or curriculum revisions, and appear disengaged during planning sessions. What few know is that Jordan has ADHD and is trying to manage their workload without disclosing it formally. Challenges. Tensions have begun to build in the department. Some faculty feel like they're picking up the slack, while others admire Jordan's creativity, but question their reliability in shared tasks. If you were a colleague in this department, how might you approach supporting Jordan without overstepping or making assumptions? Going to answer Stephanie's question while folks take a second to think about how you would deal with that situation. Actually, I can't stop sharing my screen right now, so I'll do that in a second. I'd ask if I could share some, if I could share some of the administrative load with him as a colleague. Yeah, so checking in to see, hey, how can I help you? I love that strategy of being like, what can I do for you? Like coming in and being like, how can I help you? Not making the assumption that, what can be done. Great. State what you're noticing and ask what they need. Yeah. So coming in with like, hey, I noticed maybe you look tired or whatever it is. And how can I help you again? Open delegation, asking which member would like each task. This allows them to pick and choose according to their strengths. Absolutely. And then you can get an opportunity to learn someone's strengths that way too, right? And hearing what people like. I think that's a big thing that I encourage as well, is to have meetings to say, this works well for me, this doesn't, this is what really frustrates me, and this is how I like to be interacted with, like answering all like the challenging questions that we kind of take for granted, but it makes you reflect on yourself too, like, why am I getting frustrated if someone asks me like this, or interrupts me, or just calls me out of the blue, things like that. So it kind of creates the culture of understanding as well. Great. We can ask if and what we can do. Perfect. Suggesting to do work together as a buddy system. That's what we've been hearing a lot, or on social media and around the body doubling. I know that sometimes it's easier said than done because just life, but holding someone accountable or yourself accountable just by having someone like even on the screen working might be helpful. Talk with them privately. I think that's really key, is to the private part too. So you're not calling someone out. That's great, to address your concerns and see what support they need. I would talk about what I've noticed and ask if there is anything I can do to help. Great. I think I would try and build in things like meeting reminders, check-ins around deadlines, creating other ways of engagement. Yes. So that's saying too that there isn't a one way that we need to be doing these things. It's re-envisioning ways that things can be done, and meeting deadlines can be met. It's great. Take them for a tea and a chat to check in. I love that. Just how are you doing? And making it feel safe that someone's listening. Maybe Jordan just needed someone to listen and that you're there for them. Okay, last one. I may say, I really like your style, but some are having difficulty with some things. Do you want to hear more about it? That's a good one too, because you're showing other people's concerns. And I like how you said, depending on how your relationship is too. So maybe you can be more frank with them. That's great. And sometimes honesty is good as well when it's showing the team is needing something as well. So to maybe tagging that on to other suggestions of how are you doing, and then adding that in, that's great. Thank you all for your participation. I think I just added a couple here. I think most of them were said. Lead with curiosity, not assumptions. Create space for casual collaboration. Gently share, don't fix. Speak up for fairness without finger pointing. And model supportive norms. So just to speak to some of these a little bit as well. So for the model supportive norms, it's really in meetings trying to be the person who recaps key points. So you're the one who's kind of, maybe you're noticing that Jordan needs certain things, so you're kind of presenting them, doing them to see if they will help. So you're supporting in a way that's not telling Jordan what they need, but you're kind of displaying it through other actions. And again, speak up for fairness. I was trying to get to the idea of saying if tensions are really high around the workload situation, team dynamics, being able to say, I've noticed some of us are carrying more at different times. Maybe we can revisit how we are carrying or divvying things up, which is kind of what Rob said, is like basically the same thing of being like, hey, people are having challenges. How can we change this? Into balancing things in a different way. All right, great. And then the second one, we have quiet burnout, which is relatable for me. So we have Renee is a staff member in the university's accessibility services office. Passionate about her work, she's known for her commitment to supporting students. But behind the scenes, Renee is emotionally exhausted. She's been masking her ADHD symptoms for years, overcompensating to meet expectations, staying late to catch up, and never taking sick days. She hasn't disclosed her ADHD diagnosis, fearing she'll be seen as unreliable or less competent in a role that focuses on helping others. And I can relate to that too, just because I feel like growing up in a society where ADHD wasn't spoken about at all, and the stigmas that exist, you have a lot of I have a lot of internal feelings about how it is perceived, even though I know how it is for me. It's being the fear of being judged, I guess. So her perfectionism is shaped by past criticism, is starting to take a toll on her mental health and overall well-being. So challenges, Renee wants to seek support, but worries it could backfire. She doesn't know where to start and feels isolated despite working in an office meant to champion inclusion. How can we make disclosure feel safe? And how might we support those who aren't ready to disclose it all? And this is coming from a team, a peer perspective, not like a person who can change the system or change policy, but as peer to peer, how can we make someone feel safe in their choices? I know it's getting to the end of the hour, so I can also help with these answers as well. Give one more. Encourage staff who are aware of ADHD challenges and who are ready to help to post a sticker on their office door to know what we, and to know that, sorry, I moved, to know that we can reach to them if needed. Okay, so, like kind of raising awareness that we're there for them, I think is what I hear. To say, hey, we're here to encourage dialogue and come reach out if you need to. Believe. Perfect. Talk openly about my journey with ADHD. And that's great. I think that's why I enjoy doing these presentations, coming from my experience as well, is to hope that by me talking about it also helps me with my challenges, but also helps other folks be like, oh, those things sound true for me too, and we're not alone. You can start by empathizing with Renee's burnout, whatever the source. Many employees experience this in a caregiver context, and then ask, who can I support you, or how can I support you, and how can we as a team support you? Love that. Just being very kind, leading by kindness. It's great. More education, resources, and workshops on ADHD that are offered at workplaces. That's great. That's absolutely helpful. Learning, knowledge is power. Knowing how overloaded our accessibility services office is, this is a tough one. It's everyone is working overtime to keep up. I've heard that, and thank you so much for the work that you do. However, having management model, taking breaks, prioritizing work, and supporting a balance and overload, and normalizing conversations about burnout can help. That's wonderful. I literally think I used those as my solutions on the next page. So this is great. Open conversations of support might be helpful. Talking about the importance of self-care and mental health, create an atmosphere of kindness, not perfection. It's great. I might say to Renee, I've noticed you're not yourself lately. You used to laugh more. I see you. Oh, yeah, I see you are so intense. I am ADHD too. Do you want to talk to me more about self-care and how females have to overcompensate more than males? And I think that's what you mean too about like masking and like having to perform in certain ways. That's great. I find disclosing ADHD touchy, 100%. As some institutions will explain the burnout by this diagnosis, when we might need to open the discussion about the workload that is creating this fatigue and the culture. So that's why it's really hard too, when it's like, well, the deadlines are the deadlines. So if you take that break, that deadline's still there. So you have to get the work done. So I totally hear you, and it's a really tricky situation. So I think it's about also how do we manage this within these institutions and policies while still taking care of each other and ourselves. So thank you again, everyone, for participating. These are great. Just to briefly go over my solutions, which I think they've all been said, but model healthy boundaries and reset. So normalize taking lunch breaks, maybe do them together or by yourself. We all need time alone. Using the sick days, logging off on time if you can, and then trying to protect our own well-being and creating permission for others to do the same if possible. Create micro moments of connection. It's a lot of you folks already said, it's just saying, how are you really doing? Not just, hey, how are you? And walk away, taking time to see what's going on with someone. I really like this one, celebrate effort, not just output. That everywhere I've worked, and it's really hard to publicly praise not just big deliverables, but recognizing things like compassion, persistence, getting through a really tough day or things like that is really important. Talking about invisible load without requiring disclosure. So without naming ADHD or any diagnosis, you can still say things like, I've been feeling stretched thin lately. This is coming from Renee's point of view. So I've been feeling stretched thin lately. It's wild how much we carry behind the scenes. And then maybe Renee can open a dialogue to hear how other people are feeling. And then advocate for systems that work for everyone little by little. Maybe it can change, but it's hard again when you're in accessibility services, and this is just what it is. But the flexible timelines, realistic expectations and things like that, but that's not always possible. So I'm cognizant of that. I did see. Okay. I did want to recommend one book too. It's really highly spoken about book to help support if you are a teacher or have children, or even for yourself in school. It's really great support for you to learn how different techniques and methods. And as I said, it's not just for teachers. I think it can help wherever you are, in especially academia. And I will be giving a PDF of this. There's also, I wanted to mention 2 one-page documents that are shareables. I believe they're on the website, that have really great resources that are not just our support groups and programs, but also different webinars and readings that might be helpful for you, whether you're an educator or a staff member or just a human who has ADHD and is looking for more supports. I've created those lists, so hopefully they will help guide you in different areas that might help with your journey or your learning. And that is it for me for right now. So I know it's 12:55, but I'm happy to stick around for 10-15 minutes to answer any questions if I can. And if not, I will refer you to who hopefully can answer your questions. Oh, thank you for sharing the document as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Dana. I am seeing a couple of questions in the Q&A, so
I didn't go there.
I will read those.
I think I can open it.
Yeah,
I might have to read it anyways to process it, so I will.
fair enough.
Okay. Copy of the presentation, absolutely. I will be sending that, and then the list of references for the data will be there as well. And then I think that might have been a comment to, yeah, one of the case studies.
Yeah. Dana, maybe you can sort of talk about, I know you might have briefly mentioned about how the interactions between ADHD and substance use. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the correlation that we have, and again, that's not the substance use disorder is not our expertise, but understanding that impulsivity and coping mechanisms, especially for unmedicated folks or undiagnosed, I guess, or untreated folks, will kind of tend, there has been correlations based off research that has said that people will use substances as coping mechanisms, or also due to the fact of that impulsive part of their ADHD. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done, so I'm very careful with my words. So I think that's why the support group is also in place for folks who have both SUD and also ADHD, just to talk about correlations and experiences and the age that substance use perhaps started at, and how that has turned out with then being diagnosed and perhaps like light bulbs that have come on, or maybe nothing at all, and just still navigating things like that. So I think that with more research as well, there will be more information on that correlation. But yeah, that's a very, very high level overview. And I think that, yeah, I think I'll stop there. If there's if you have a follow-up around that.
Thanks so much. If folks want to enter any questions in the Q&A, we can totally wait. Oh, I did just see a question here. We hear that LDs and ADHD coexist in many cases. Is it true for autism as well? Do we have data to review on
Yeah,
this?
so there is common comorbidities are LDs and autism, both of them. There's actually a lot of research on autism and ADHD being comorbidities. A lot of it exists on our website. Also, CHAD is a large organization in the States, has a lot of information on that. But yes, to answer that question, just point blank, is that it is a comorbidity and there's a lot of data to review on it.
Wonderful. I also want to point out to folks that we at CICMH, we do have a few resources to learn more about some of the things that were discussed. I just put it in the chat. So we do have supporting students with ADHD info sheet. I know Dana talked about emotional regulation, so we do have an info sheet on that. And then we do have a toolkit on accessibility and accommodations if you are interested in checking that out. I know there was earlier, before we went into the case studies,
Yes.
there was a question.
I'm going to go grab that information now.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a question about, can you repeat / post those organizations where it is recognized as a disability?
Mm-hmm.
And while some of you are here still, I do want to put our survey, our feedback survey here in the chat. Please fill it out when you can. We would love to hear from you.
I just put it in the chat there if that person's still here.
Yeah, wonderful. ADHD is recognized as a disability by several organizations and legal frameworks, including the Canadian Human Rights Act, Provincial Human Rights Code, Canada Revenue Agency, and Workplace Safety and Insurance Board. Any more questions? Reminder for folks that our next webinar is in May 12th. It is on supporting resilience on campus. I know it's a very, very tumultuous time within post-secondary, so I think resilience can really play a role in supporting ourselves and supporting others. So the link can be found on our website. I'm going to paste it as well here when I can. Okay, I think we might be good and okay. Again, any more questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to the email that Dana provided, info@caddac.ca. Am I correct? Wonderful.
Yeah, it's also on our website, but info@CADDAC.ca.
Okay, perfect. And folks, again, feel free to check out the recording. It will be on our website by end of day, so feel free to share that. Dana, thank you so, so much for this fantastic presentation. We learned so much. I learned so much, and very excited to check out the website and the resources that you had provided. Thank you, everyone, for being here and joining us during your lunch break. I hope you had a good lunch, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining as well. Have a great day.